Hey guys, this is Justin Kramer here for Zoom networking for Saturday, November 23rd. I'm excited to be here, and we've got a really special guest today. Friend of mine who's helped me with my business and has just got a plethora of knowledge. Started off as a student like most of us and built up a amazing business. He's an entrepreneur, has helped me with my business structure. Marco Diaz. Marco, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How's everybody doing today?
We're good, man. Thank you for being here. So, real quick, for those of the folks that don't know you, where are you located? Where are you at in the United
I
States?
am in Anaheim, California.
Okay, and that's where your business is based out of, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so, business structure, man, this is a big topic. And to be fair to Marco, my business structure was kind of a mess. And I went through a company initially to help me get my LLCs set up. And they'll remain nameless for now, but they basically did the bare minimum. And when you're doing this, when you're getting started in this thing, and Marco, you can step in anytime, but you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't ask, you're probably not going to be told. And if you don't know the right questions to ask, you're not going to get what you need usually. And so for your business, for the new investor, for the people that are just getting started, do you set up the LLC for them? Can they just come to you and ask you and have you set up their LLC for them?
Yes, definitely. But before that, we always have like a thorough conversation on where they're at right now, personally, where they want to go, what kind of operations they want to entail.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of questions to ask when starting an entity because
Mhm.
there's not a one size fits all. I know that a lot of us have seen the similar structures for real estate, S corps, holding companies, and whatnot.
Right.
Sometimes people have more than what they need. Sometimes people don't have enough protection or companies for their operations. So
Mhm.
it's really, getting to know exactly where you're at in your career or if you're just beginning. And I kind of guide you with a bunch of questions on what I think would be the best for your particular case. But at the end of the day, it does depend on the person, on how much time or money they want to invest, because the more complicated structures you have, there are, a lot of things to maintain and be ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we get into the compliance stuff and talking about the compliance stuff. So what about for you? So when you first started, obviously you didn't have you to go to. What has have you've kind of always been an entrepreneur, right? Has that kind of always been a thing in your life, entrepreneurship and starting businesses?
It definitely has for sure. I've had that entrepreneur bug in me since I was 13, 14 years old, selling, chocolate bars, Orange County register subscriptions and whatnot, entrepreneuring in a lot of other people's businesses as well.
Oh,
I've
nice.
just always had a knack for business.
Nice. Love it. And
Yeah.
so what about real estate? Was that something that like was on your radar always, or did you kind of find that,
Ye-
stumble upon it?
Yeah, so basically, the first thing that got me hooked was the fact that 90% of all millionaires in the US are millionaires due to real estate. And once I heard that, I said, oh, this is where I'm going to go. 100%, you know?
Yep, yep, yep. Sound like me. Started watching YouTube and giving myself a financial education. All of a sudden, all roads lead back to real estate in one way or another. Um, so when we're talking about the business structure, are you also helping people get their bank accounts set up and kind of walking them through that process as well?
Yes, 100%, because there are a lot of details and nuances in when you're doing your formation to
Yeah,
be able to get right.
yeah,
Sometimes, you're just told, oh, here's your paperwork, then, you do yourself. But if you don't know how to approach a situation or ask the right questions, having all those structures and all that paperwork at the end of the day cannot protect you when something really does happen. So it is kind of like not the best ethical, situation for you to get into entities and you don't even know what's going on or how
yeah.
to.
So real quick, let's talk about a little bit about my situation. So when I came to Marco, Marco was introduced to me by my other business partner, Mark. And when I approached Marco, and showed him kind of what I had, I mean, quite frankly, it was just the skeleton bare minimum, absolute bare minimum of what you need. I had no clue. I really had no clue of some of the pieces that needed to be added to the puzzle, and that's where Marco was just brilliant. And so, talk about a little bit, put together my book, my minutes, all of that stuff, right? So I've got a full package, and people don't know about this stuff, right? They don't know that they have to maintain the minutes, and they don't, if they make any major changes, that process, right? And so Marco was right. I mean, we met, right? So we met in person. I mean, Marco, you'll meet people in person or on Zoom, right? I mean, either or.
Yeah, 100%. I have a physical office here in Anaheim, so anyone that's in the Orange County, LA, or even San Diego area can
Yeah,
come up and get to know each other.
right. So we met in person, but and he spent as long as we needed really to kind of help me understand what needed to be done, what everything was, and I've been set up properly ever since. Now I've been making some other changes to my business recently that are going to require some additional configuration, but for the most part, especially for the people who are just starting off and wondering like, what do I do? How do I do this? Um, give us kind of a breakdown, Marco. What does that look like? So if I approach you as a brand new investor, brand new business owner, and I just need, let's say I'm planning on investing, right? I don't have any properties yet, but I'm planning on investing, and I care about anonymity. What would that look like if I were to approach you? Like, what would that process look like with you?
So, beginning with anonymity, if you want to start and maintain your anonymity, first and foremost, you do have to start with the holding company, preferably Wyoming. And the reason for that is that company would own any other companies you open up. And a lot of people sometimes start the opposite. They start with the company in their home state or in the state where they plan to do business. And then when they want to do anonymity, they open up a Wyoming holding company, but then your information is already out there. So just starting like that, you already are going to lose anonymity.
Why Wyoming?
Well, Wyoming is one of the best states for charging order protections and the way they disclose information. So if you go to Wyoming's Secretary of State website and you look up anyone else's company, you will never see who the member or the owners are for that company. So that is very crucial in anonymity. And then also the charging order protection is the second most important thing because whenever a company gets sued or they enter a judgment, Wyoming has strict laws that prevent anyone from earning the interest in your company. So the worst thing that can happen would be if they were to claim the judgment against your LLC or your corp, then whenever you distribute funds to the owners, in that case, you would have to pay whatever judgment or lien or whatever's awarded to them. But there are a lot of strategies that you can utilize to protect yourself. And the third most important reason is whenever anyone would be getting sued, the first thing the lawyers look at is who is this person? What do they own? What can we find about him? Because they want to see how big of a, cash prize they can get essentially. And if they see that there's a Wyoming entity in place, then most of the time they're not even going to want to bother to look into it because they know they're going to have a lot of hard time to try and get this case, awarded or seen through. So
Yeah,
that's why Wyoming, and besides, also the fourth thing, it's very cheap to maintain.
yeah,
So, it has everything. It's the best, most business friendly state for holding companies.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then, so for me, for example, I'm in California. So any LLC you start in California, you have to pay $800 a year for the privilege of having an LLC in California, apparently. So it's expensive, and a lot of states, can be expensive to start LLCs like that. So that's good to know. Um, so what about, let's talk real quick about maintaining that anonymity, because I had my holding company set up in Wyoming. And by the way, guys, just aside, like I'm gonna have to probably dissolve that holding company because I made a mistake that I wasn't aware about. So I went in every year you have to file, like California calls it a statement of information. I forget what Wyoming calls it. Refresh my memory, Marco. Every
Annual report.
annual report. Okay, thank you. So Wyoming has an annual report you have to file every year if you want to maintain, legitimacy of your LLC. You want to maintain that LLC. So I went in and it had expired, right? So my previous company who had helped me set up my LLC, they didn't notify me. They didn't help me with it at all. They were supposed to, but they didn't. And so I had to go in there and do it myself. Well, when I went in there and did it myself and had my name on the annual report, that broke my anonymity. You're actually supposed to have your what do you recommend, Marco? Your registered agent or whoever
Registered agent.
registered agent file that annual report for you because now your name's not on it. So like, you'd think that would be kind of common sense. Like if I'm filing this annual report and I'm putting my name on it, um, that is now breaking anonymity because now anybody who goes and looks can see that I was the one who filed that annual report. Well, who am I? And they'll look into that, right? So that's kind of right there. That was just something I had no clue about. And as a result, now if I want to maintain anonymity with my real estate holding, I gotta we gotta redo it, right? We gotta start over. So little things like this, that's why going to somebody like a Marco is really, really invaluable because these are some of the things that you'll learn. Now, Mark, do you provide registry agent service as well?
Only in California. So
Okay.
one of my entities is registered only in California because you can only do it in the state where you're doing business in.
Okay. Got it. And what about, so if you do open up a Wyoming LLC for folks, or if you in any state for that matter, can you help them get that registered agent service set up?
Yeah, I point you to a company. There's a couple companies that have registered agent services in all 50 states, and
Mhm.
they're all fairly cheap. It just depends what you would exactly like for yourself.
Got it. And for those who don't know, why do you even need a registered agent? Like, what's
Well,
the
for
point of that?
California, the Secretary of State, it's a mandatory thing that you need a registered agent in California.
Mhm.
But the most of the reason why you need a registered agent in any state is so there's somewhere physically that anyone can serve papers to. So if you're gonna get sued, they have somewhere where they can go ahead and deliver the papers to.
Got it. So I'm super visual. And one of the things Mark will do when he sits down with you is, draw out a mind map or a flow chart of how the structure is going to be, right? Or what the best structure is going to be for your situation. For the average investor, right? I'm just going to give you a quick scenario. Um, I'm going to be buying real estate in Texas. Okay. I'm going to be buying and holding real estate in Texas. I have a California LLC that's doing acquisitions. It does business in California, Florida, Texas, right? Um, that acquisition company, that's my wholesale company, right? Or my acquisition slash wholesale company. That's what's finding me the deals, right? So, but I want to make sure that those properties that I'm holding in Texas are going to remain anonymous. Like my name's not going to be associated with it. What would be, and we don't need to go too much into the weeds, but what would be like a high level structure you would recommend for something like that?
So for something like that, you definitely would start with right with your holding company. Your holding company would own your acquisitions company.
Mhm,
And for you to have legal standing in Texas, which is where you have your property, you need
mhm,
to foreign file your California entity
mhm.
in Texas to have legal recourse. So if you need to evict your tenant or you need to sue your tenant or the tenant sues you, then your legal entity in California has to be foreign filed in that state. If not, then you have no legal recourse there.
And what about the properties in Texas? Do they get put in under the holding company? The holding company owns those?
Yeah, from there, it just depends. There's a couple ways you can do it. Whenever you move title on those properties, you can move title straight to your holding company, or you can do it through your California company. It just depends on what information is going to be disclosed. right? Because a lot of people can transfer title but not record it.
Mhm.
So it just really depends on your situation and how your overall structure is for you to do that safely.
Got
And then
it.
also, you also got to consider taxes as well. Like if you have a corporation, an Inc., and you transfer the property, that's a capital gains action. So if you do that unknowingly, then you're going to have to pay capital gains tax on that, even though you're moving it from one of your entities to another entity. But since a business entity is its entity on its own, then that's how the federal government would see it,
So they look
or a
at it as a
corporation.
realized gain. They look at it as a I guess if for lack of a better term, a realized gain. If one business is transferring a property to another business, a business that received the property is realizing some sort of gain. Is that kind of
For a corporation, not an
or
LLC,
oh,
but
I
for
got
a
you. I got you.
corporation.
I
Because
got you.
corporations have different rules than LLCs.
Right, right. Well, what about just for LLCs? How about just we'll just keep it on the LLC side. I've heard people say like, hey, if you're buying properties in Texas, you want to keep those, you want to open up the LLC in Texas and keep the properties in that LLC in Texas. Is that another kind of way to go about it?
You definitely can because Texas has charging order protection as well, but
Hmm.
they don't have strong anonymity.
Hmm.
But if you plan on having a portfolio in Texas, I would definitely do a Texas LLC for sure.
Hmm.
That way, when you're doing your acquisitions with your California entity, they don't get all mixed up, right?
Okay.
Because say that California entity owns your Texas properties, but you're using your California entity to wholesale in a different state,
Mhm.
something happens, they're going to sue your California entity, and who's holding that title to the Texas properties, your
Right,
California entity.
right.
So you kind of want to keep your operations separate from the entities that hold title, or who the entities that own other entities.
Got it. On the business funding side of it, right? Because we hear a lot about business credit, business funding, and making sure that your business is structured properly. Is that something you help folks with to ensure that they're set up properly for business funding?
Yes, 100%. Because when you start doing business funding and you're mixing anonymity,
Mhm.
those, that's oil and water. They don't mix because when whoever's going to be funding you wants to be able to find you online and everywhere and make sure that you are a real person or a real business. So
Right,
you just have to have it done with different structures.
right. Yeah, that was something I learned kind of the hard way as well. It's like, look, if I want to have this entity, this business acquire business funding, business credit, it can't be anonymous. Like I have to be the owner. They have to be able to look at that entity and see that I'm the owner of it, right? That's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and also it involves everything from the name that you use, what kind of a NAICS code is put into your business, and there's a lot of small details that go further involved with that, like
Right,
the type of address you use, your phone number, if you have a website.
right,
So everything really does begin since everything starts since the beginning of what you intend to do. That's why I would ask so many questions on what you plan to do and what you want to do. That way you have a visual like, okay, this entity is going to be my acquisitions, this entity is going to be my holding, this entity is going to be for funding, and you want to keep everything separate. So that way, if someone gets in trouble, it stays locked away in that one entity.
right. That makes sense. Mike, thank you
Hey,
for raising your hand, bud. How are you?
good. How you doing, brother?
Good. Doing great, man.
So my question is, I have, I believe, 5 properties under an S corp. If I were to change that, just to reiterate what he said, if I were to change that to a holding company, that's a capital gains transaction, right?
Okay, so is it an S corp? Is it an LLC taxed as an S corp, or is it an S corp in general?
S corp in general.
Okay, so you have an S corp and you have 5 properties in that under that entity,
Yes.
and you want to transfer the title to a holding company.
Yes.
Okay, do you already have a holding company?
I do not.
Okay, so you would definitely start a holding company in Wyoming, right?
Right.
And then for you to transfer the properties, you would just transfer the title, but you would have to do it with the right paperwork. When you're doing an S corp or a corporation, they are the best for protection because they have a lot of rules. But in that sense, there are a lot of formalities in the way you do that action. So, do you have an operating agreement?
Mm, I don't think so.
Okay, well, you definitely need an operating agreement, and there are certain formalities that you have to do with your corporation, like maintaining meeting minutes and resolutions. So
Oh yeah.
right? Since your entity is its own entity aside from you, you have to document these meetings, and basically you have to have a vote and let your company give you like a permission slip. That's how I see resolutions. So that way you have permission from your company to be able to move properties to a different entity. But then I would double check either with your county if there are transfer taxes on that, because depending on the county and how the title is structured, then you might have tax implications there. But for that, I would definitely talk to a CPA and ask him. That way, they would know exactly what you're gonna have to pay. And if not, your holding company can own your Texas companies as well, but it just depends on how much risk mitigation you want to do with your properties. And to determine that, I would look at how much equity do you have in each property, how much cash flow is each property giving you. So you kind of got to assess your properties and put them into categories to see, okay, this property is really well cash flowing, this property is not. Then it might make sense to separate those two entities, because if something happens, you don't want all your entities to be in the crosshairs for any, judgments or liens or lawsuits.
Okay, and you said the deed itself of the home will go to the holding company, which
Y-
is I acquired all of these subject to. So the last thing I want is to throw another red flag with the lender, right? So
and
that's where I was
yep,
going with this.
that's exactly the good point. When you're assessing your properties, you have to assess the financing, right? Because when you start doing with financing, if these companies, once they see that the title is not, in that name, then they're going to try and do a sale clause. So you got to really assess every single property, how it's financed, how much equity, how much cash flow, and really assess it to be able to determine what you need to do and separate them, and why you want to separate them. If you want to separate them for protection, you can also just open up a couple other Texas LLCs and just move them there. But it really just depends on the information for each property.
Right.
And let's say real quick, let's say hypothetically he did that. He opened up a couple of Texas LLCs and just moved them in there. That Wyoming holding company, you would still recommend the Wyoming holding company owns all of it, right? Sort of like the umbrella.
Yes, because you still want that charging order protection from Wyoming. And since Wyoming would own the Texas companies, the Wyoming would be the sole member of your Texas LLCs. And then by
Right.
it being the sole member, then, but it also depends now on your operating agreements for all your entities. If your operating agreements are not structured the correct way and they don't have the correct verbiage, then all that protection, all those laws won't even be in play for your entity, right?
Yeah.
So the compliance and formalities is equally as crucial as any other move you're gonna make, because you can make all these moves, but if your operating agreement does not allow you to, or if it allows you to, and you have all these formalities that you don't do, then all those actions are null and void, and then you're stuck at square one again.
Yeah, meaning like if you're not following the procedures to maintain your LLCs properly, if you ever get pulled in front of a judge in court and they look at how you're treating your companies, treating your LLCs, they can easily say, "Well, wait a second, you're not following your own guidelines, your own operating agreement. You're not following, the recommended procedures for your business or our compliance standards. So why should we treat you separate from your business if you're not even going to take it seriously? Right? If you're not running it as a business, then we're just going to treat your business as if it's you, right? Like that's why I always hear about, when you're cross mingling funds, that's why it's so important to separate funds, right? Because if a judge looks at that and says, "Well, wait a second, you're not separating your personal funds from your business, so why should we separate you from your business?" Right?
Yeah, and essentially what you're just describing there is called like piercing the corporate veil. There
Yeah.
are definitely a lot of ways you can pierce the corporate veil by not doing all of these formalities, because your business entity is separate from you yourself. And like you said, commingling funds, not maintaining formalities, there's a lot of things that if you don't do them right, then there's no point in having all these protections, because a judge can say, hey, that entity is an alter ego of yourself, or you're just treating that entity like a hobby. It's not, you're not really treating it how it should be. So, you lose all that protection anyways by
Yeah.
not doing that part.
Cool. Well, Mike, does that help at all? Did we answer your question?
Oh yeah. Thank you guys
Okay,
so much.
cool. Yeah, you bet, man. What's up, Rob?
Hey, what's going on? Hey, Marco, how you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Rob.
I got you drinking, man. Sorry about
I
that.
know I have a dry throat right now.
Hey, I had a quick question, man, regarding minutes here. I'm a brand new investor, so I understand recording, documenting minutes, but can you really define and break that down as a brand new investor? What entails that?
Do you already have a business entity?
An LLC, meaning?
Yeah, an LLC or
Correct.
corp. Do you have one or
Yes.
no?
Yes, I do.
Okay, because if you have a corporation, then that's mandatory. For
Okay.
LLCs, it's not really mandatory, but it's state specific. Here in California, LLCs are not required to have meeting minutes, but it is definitely favorable. Let me go back to the documentation because if something happens, whenever you go to court, you want to prove that you're making all these actions on the best behalf of your company. But meeting minutes, basically what it is, it's just you're documenting the time, the place, who was there. If you have multiple members or not, even if it's just yourself, you still gotta put. I was here at this time at this meeting, and we're gonna discuss about opening a bank account. So then you go ahead and create a resolution where you're saying, I go ahead and authorize that your name, Rob, is going to be authorized to open up bank accounts on behalf of ABC LLC and has the power to do anything involved with that for the company, depositing checks, cashing checks, sending wires, receiving money, and ultimately that goes and coincides with your operating agreement. You definitely should have an operating agreement. There are a lot of templates out there online that you can go ahead and get for free, but you really have to read them and know what that operating agreement says because that operating agreement will dictate how your meeting minutes have to be approved or not approved or what voting rights you need to have to be able to approve the actions. So meeting minutes, that's all it is. You're basically documenting your actions on behalf of the company. And if you are a sole member, then obviously you're just going to approve everything yourself. And apart from that, there is a form that's called written consent without action. You fill out a form, and that written consent without action is giving you pretense on doing several actions without having to record these meetings. And when you're a single member, that's normally fine. But when you're involved in a partnership or you have multiple members, then I wouldn't really recommend that because you need to have documented that the other members agree. And depending on their voting rights, how much percent of the company they own or the voting shares, you would need all that documented for anything in the future. If something comes up, you're gonna go back and look at the meeting minutes.
Yeah, and all
Okay. I
this, like,
appreciate
I
that.
know that I was just gonna say this is, there's a lot of information we're given right now, right? And I know it's like for me, when I sat down with Marco, I had to go over things like a couple times with him before I kind of it started to sink in. But all of this stuff matters really, someone like Mike who's got multiple properties and they care about maintaining that anonymity. That's where all this really comes into play. If you've got no properties or you've even got like just one, and it's like, for example, like I have a property, it's right now it's just debt. So if an attorney were to look at me and just be like, what are they going to come after me for? They can come after my debt if they want, but you know, maintaining the anonymity piece is where a lot of these, you know, maintaining minutes, doing all these things right from the beginning come into play. But this is why it's so important to have a Marco, right? Because when you're doing all this stuff, you want to make sure you're doing it right from the beginning, right? So,
Right. So,
yeah.
with that said, when it comes to recording the minutes, what do you suggest with today's day and age? What tool or what app do I use?
Mm.
So I mean, there's Rocket Lawyer, there's lawdepot.com. There's these websites that you can get the meeting minute templates for free, and basically you just fill out a questionnaire, and it says, they ask you the question, and you just fill it out, and that is like the most basic thing that you can do for you to have your meeting minutes, in the beginning. But I
Right.
always advise if you are going to do any major move where you're gonna contract with somebody or joint venture or do something that's going to be very serious, then in that case, I would have those meeting minutes drafted by a lawyer or attorney because that's what they do. They will draft it, they're gonna charge $300, $400, $500 an hour, but basically when they draft that form for you, they're gonna make sure that every single clause, every single verbiage in there is up to date, because even the words, um, the single word themselves can give a discrepancy, like may or shall. If something says, "Hey, Rob may do this action," then that doesn't really mean yes or no. And if it says Rob shall do this action, then that means that based on that paper, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, then you void your own contract. So that's
Got it.
where attorneys come in for sure.
So highly recommended on pretty much every deal, correct?
I mean, yeah, if you have a lot of equity and you don't want to lose a property or whatnot, I would, but it just really depends on your situation. Some people are in that position to hire attorneys and lawyers and do all this, and some people are not. It just depends on, if you're making money or not, basically.
What's up, Elaine?
Hello. Okay, so my question is on FinCEN. So apparently you have to register.
Yes.
So now what I did was I registered me personally first. I now have my own number. And so I have two different LLCs. And so I wanted to register them next. And from what I understand is if you register them with your personal FinCEN number, then if anything with you changes, it automatically all the different companies change right in line. Is that true? And if so, how do I do this?
Yeah. Your entities. When did you get your entities? What year?
Oh, so I did one in 2023, the end of 2023. I haven't done any in 2024. And then
Okay.
I did one in 2022, but I didn't realize I didn't use it much and it became inactive.
Okay. So basically, the reason why I ask is because in 2024, if any new entities are made in 2024, you have to get that filing done within 90 days of the state approving the entity. And then to answer your question, what you did, yes, is correct. You went ahead and you got your FinCEN ID for your personal self, and
Yeah.
then you're gonna register, right, the BOI filings on the other two LLCs. So when it gets to a section, instead of you having to put your name individually and fill out all those boxes again, you just put your FinCEN ID in that one box, and then you move on, right? Because now they already have all that information recorded. So that is the best case, because if you have multiple entities, instead of having to fill that one section out all the time, you just input your number and you move on to the next section. And then two, whenever you or anything from your personal self changes, like your address or you get married or your last name or whatever, yeah, when you update that on your personal profile, it will update it on all your other entities 100% for sure.
So now I started doing the other day, I started doing the business entity. And I think I got to, I'm not sure, but I think I got to line 18 when it had said something about the FinCEN ID. So I wasn't exactly sure. Do I put my FinCEN number there or what?
Oh, on the BOI filing?
Yeah.
I don't remember off the top of my head what page or line 18 is, but I can definitely go over it with you and let you know what you should be putting on there.
And then I got one more is at one time I did have a Wyoming LLC, but then I let it lapse. I was doing it with somebody else. So now I should do the Wyoming LLC. Do the Wyoming LLC as my holding company. And then if I have properties either in Georgia or Florida or another state, how does that work? Do I have to do the foreign entity? And if I do that foreign entity, all that anonymity just went down the tubes.
Yeah, so you have to first check on the status of your Wyoming entity because if you don't do the annual report every year, it'll get administratively dissolved. So you
Yeah.
have to first check the status and see is it inactive, or if it's inactive, you just have to do your annual report and your tax filing, and then it'll become active again. If not, if it's dissolved, right, then you have to start a new one. But when you're doing that anonymity, you would have to do definitely another Wyoming LLC as a buffer in between. So you have two Wyoming LLCs, one that's going to own the properties, but then that Wyoming LLC is owned by another one. So when you foreign file the one, and the name pops up, it's going to show up as the owner of these LLCs are your Wyoming LLC name in those states. And then as far as who owns this Wyoming LLC, it's going to be your other Wyoming LLC that is not going to get foreign filed entity because your holding company that holds your stuff that business should never do that entity should never do business and it stays in Wyoming. That way you stay protected because if you start moving it around, then like you said, if you foreign file that entity, now that Wyoming entity is applicable to those states' laws, and then you wouldn't have the protection you would want.
Yeah. So I want to do the Wyoming holding one and have nothing in it. Then I want to do another Wyoming one, and that's when that's where my real estate is going to be held.
You have real estate in Georgia and Florida, you mentioned.
Um, I used to have some in Florida, and I'm currently thinking about buying some in Georgia. And
Oh,
I'm currently here in Connecticut.
okay, and the one in Florida is owned by the Wyoming holding company.
I haven't. I sold it, so I don't have to worry about it. I'm just trying to start from scratch and do it the correct way because like we screwed it up or we didn't do it correctly or something. But boy, we learned.
Yeah,
How to do it right and how to not so good.
yeah, I see. So you're trying to see, okay, if you need another Wyoming LLC that's brand new and fresh, once you get that one, when you want to acquire property in a different state, what your next move should be.
Yeah,
That's what you're asking?
yeah,
Okay, so it definitely depends on the state that you're going to be buying a property in because every state has different rules. So that's definitely a factor for sure. And as far as the name, if the state is a disclosure state, then I would have a buffer entity in between. If it's not, you wouldn't need it, but it just depends on your operations as well. So for you, it would be nice to do a whole breakdown and analysis of where you stand right now, your entities, if they're compliant, what entities you have, what you need to do, so that way when you move forward, I can kind of guide you the right way.
hmm
Yeah. This is where having a visual sort of flow chart really, really helps. Like
yeah,
to see it visually, the structure broken down is really, really, really helpful. So, and then again, like for example, my property is in Texas. Texas is a non-disclosure state. So do
right.
we really need a buffer LLC in
No,
between, right? Probably
no.
not, right? So anyway, everybody that the point is everybody's situation is very different. And depending on what states they're operating in, those states have different
hmm
what's up, Steve?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Um, so one of the questions that was asked a little earlier was about the meeting minutes. Absolutely love what you said there. And I just wanted to kind of give an example of what I do on mine. If I just use a program called OneNote, and literally I've got a folder that says business planning, and I keep all the minutes and everything in there, so I can go through here and basically look at whichever quarter it is and see, okay, here's what we talked about, here's what we're discussing, and like found a lease option buyer for Jenna, and then you were talking about, hey, what did we vote on? We voted to deed the property over to our other LLC, and so we have those type of things. And like Marco said, having that operating agreement, you got to make sure you follow what you said in there. Going to the lawyer side on that and having them review those
I am a
place.
OneNote junkie. I
Yep.
love OneNote. OneNote's an amazing way because think about it like this, guys. It's an app you can have on your mobile phone. So you can just literally bring that thing up and type out your meeting minutes right there, right where you're at.
Yep.
So,
And then you can just
so
template the
helpful.
thing and you just
Yeah,
copy it for the next one. It makes it
yeah.
so easy.
Super easy. Yeah.
Yep. My question, it was kind of covered a little earlier. It's related to the BOA report. or BOI report, I should
BOI.
say.
Yeah.
One of the concerns I hadn't actually researched it enough. I've got to finish filing it for all my LLCs still. I just wanted to make sure and get confirmation from someone else that it was not going to mess up my anonymity. I do have my FinCEN number already for the multiple members we have, and I'd just be putting that in there. And I just didn't want to mess up the anonymity side of that in filing that for each entity.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the biggest concerns, right? No, your anonymity will not be broken. The BOY, they use this information internally. Basically, the Department of Financial Crimes is just collecting information on all the entities that are created, and they're just trying to prevent terrorism, money laundering, and stuff like that. So they use that information because there are a lot of foreign people who live abroad and create LLCs or corporations in the U.S., and they make a mess of that. So that's really why they're collecting everyone's information. So yeah, you have no worries about anonymity. It's gonna be, fine.
Okay. And then the other piece to that is I have one of my C corps, which I have temporarily dissolved. And I was thinking about re-enabling it. If I re-enable it now, going to have to file that FinCEN. But I dissolved it earlier this year. If I already dissolved it, I shouldn't have to file that FinCEN, you think, right?
Yeah, you already dissolved it. Like you went to your Secretary of State and your entity
It's
is
already been
dissolved.
dissolved through the Secretary of State. I was
When was
thinking
it
about
created?
re-enabling it. 3 years ago.
Oh, it was created 3 years ago, and it got dissolved in 2024.
Yes.
And you don't, and you're asking if you have to file your report for that entity.
Yes.
Yeah, you most likely don't have to. There is a 52-page document that I can go over and look for that exact detail, but you shouldn't have to dissolve. You don't shouldn't have to report it because it's already dissolved. But if you're thinking about reactivating it, whichever one you're going to reactivate, you're definitely going to have to do it for that one.
Okay. So do you know that report? I can probably just find it.
Yeah, it's still on BOI. On their website, they have the resources. So you basically just find that resource, and it has all the questions on there
Okay.
that you would be interested in. But if it's already dissolved, you wouldn't. My common sense is that you wouldn't have to file for it because it's already dissolved administratively.
That's kind
So
of
you're
where it was. I
fine.
just didn't know if you knew that specifically. I didn't think I did, but I just wanted to make sure that base was covered.
Yeah,
If you
and I
needed
don't
to.
remember reading that when I read that document. It just talks about the entities that are existing. But yeah, but if it's a dissolved, I don't think you have to. And I'm pretty sure I remember not reading anything about having to file the FinCEN for that entity because it's already dissolved and it was created before this year anyways.
Yep.
So you should be fine.
Troy, what's up, man?
Just had a couple questions. One, of course, I got to bounce something off Rob. When you're recording minutes and you're only a solo, say an S corp, if you're discussing your business with, say, your accountant or your lawyer or anything, does that count, or is it just like your personal stuff?
So yeah, so mainly you want to record who are the members, right? The members of the entity, which is what matters. You can put that you were discussing your lawyer as an invitee to the meeting, but there's really not much like reason why you would, because even if they would give you the wrong advice or whatever, it's not something that would, they have no say in your company's actions. They can advise you and you can put them that they're there as advice, but they don't have control. They don't have, power in your entity. So you wouldn't need to do that. But if you want to, you can. I mean, if your operating agreement allows you to, you can be as detailed as you want. That's not a problem. But in the fact that if there's any implication, there isn't. Unless they're a member or an owner of your company, if they have an interest in your company.
Okay. And then the other one was it's not LLC specific, like a C corp or an S corp, but what about transferring your corporation up into some sort of trust?
Oh, you want your trust? Okay. Yeah, so for that, I don't do trust, right? There are trust lawyers out there, but that is essentially the pinnacle of your structure. You would want your trust to own everything underneath it, and in the sense that you yourself, you never want to own anything on paper. You just want to control it. And when you start doing your trust would be either the owners or the beneficiaries of your entities. But on those exact details, it just depends on how your structure is set up and how you set up your your estate planning structures.
I think I understand what you're talking about there.
Yeah, so basically, whenever you're ready to do a trust, you go to your estate
Lawyer.
planner, essentially
Yeah.
a lawyer. But there's people out there who do estates who are not lawyers. So I would advise to an estate lawyer, and then they would see all your businesses and how they're structured, and then they would say, okay, you want to put all these into your trust. This is how we should do it moving forward.
Are there any rules in regards to existing LLCs we should be aware of going into 2025? Thanks in advance. So that was from Mac. Um, uh, what's your response to that? I mean, obviously that's kind of a broad question. Are there any new regulations specifically to LLCs coming up in 2025 that you know of?
So
And
I would first, yeah, I would just first ask, well, where is your LLC and what state is it located? And then is it taxed as an S corp or is it just a flow through entity? That would be my second question. But apart from that, there's nothing new laws that came out federally for LLCs, right? Besides a BOI filing, there's nothing else that came up. But being state specific, depending on what state the LLC is located, then I would just see if that state mandated anything for LLCs. But off the top of my head, I don't think there was any state mandated anything else new for LLCs.
yeah, things are kind of all up in the air right now. We don't know what the new administration is going to do with regard to business. I mean, obviously it's a from what we all understand, more business friendly administration, and the market's sort of responding to that. But as far as like, is there some place we can go, for ourselves to go check and see if any new rules have been
So
published?
your Secretary of State, that is the state office that governs the state entities.
Mhm.
So I would go there. I would sign up for their news and email list, and they would email you if anything new would come up. But when you did bring up the new administration, the only thing that I am hoping for that does get passed, it basically is for corporations. For corporations, when you have an Inc. and you start your business, if you start your business and it fails pretty much, you're able to write off $5,000 of that money as startup cost. But with the new administration, they're gonna bump that up to 50,000. So if you have a corp and say you invested in mentorship, software, and whatnot, startup cost, and your business doesn't and it fails, it doesn't succeed, then you're able to write all that money off on your personal tax returns. So that's definitely a huge help because there are a lot of people who start LLCs. They invest five, 10, $15,000, say in mentorships and programs and pulling lists and skip tracing, and they can't close the deal or something happens. They cannot write that money off because it's an LLC. But if they would have done that in a corp, they would have been able to write off up to $5,000. So that would definitely help your personal tax situation.
Where can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you?
So basically, on this QR code is like my Blink card. So it's a virtual contact card. If you scan that, you'll get my office address, my email, my phone number, my social media websites. But the Calendly link is something that I would recommend to you guys. I don't charge for an initial discovery call. I put 30 minutes, but every single time we end up going at least 45 to an hour because that's just the nature of the conversation of the business and structures, which I'm fine with. And I always give a free consultation just because I'm not a transactional base. If you try and do anything with me or not, it's more of me letting you know, hey, this is what I see was wrong. And if these things are wrong in your situation, you can go to me or to anybody else that you trust to get this figured out. Because at the end of the day, your trust and I mean, your business entities are going to be your lifeline of your career and your whole portfolio, and that's really family's livelihood that I wouldn't mess with. So
Yeah.
that's why I do very detailed discovery calls to see where you're at, where you're going, and make sure that you're at least okay to continue doing business.
Yeah, that's one thing I really, really enjoyed about working with Marco is that it is relationship based, not transactional. There's the transactional companies that'll set up an LLC for you are a dime a dozen, and the one that I went to was exactly that. I mean, they did the skeleton bare minimum, and there was really no wasn't a lot of communication. It was really more about getting me upsells and all that stuff, right? So um, was really beneficial in the amount of information that Marco was able to present and the way he explains it, the way he presents it to you, is it's easy to digest. I mean, sometimes it can get complicated depending on your situation, but for the most part, having that information presented to you and you being shown and having your kind of your hand held through the process is really, really helpful because for me, there was just a ton of stuff that I was not aware of, and there were some things that I was doing that was not correct, just plain and simple, not correct. And it's so easy to fall into that if you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. So I appreciate you, Marco. One more question for you. This group's about networking, and we come in here and we talk about community and talk about getting out there, getting building our networks. How important is a networking group like this for someone like yourself, someone who's in business and who's trying to build a relational type business?
It's so essential. I'm sure everybody's heard your network is your net worth. And when I started, I was definitely like an introvert. Introvert. I didn't have social media, and it was hard for me to network and get out there. And that definitely did not help me. But networking is 1,000% essential for you to learn and for you to get the right advice from people who are doing what you want to be doing. And at the end of the day, besides building, relationships for business, you meet a lot of new friends and you meet a lot of new people who are like-minded. And it's definitely, a factor that, iron sharpens iron. And it's really one of the most important things to do is networking. As much as you invest in your business, you should be networking all day long because you never know who's that next person that you're going to meet that's going to help you scale to the next level.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I met Marco through networking. I met my business partner through networking. But, someone like JJ, someone who's having this networking group, we're doing this for the community, right? Every Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, there's a networking Zoom, and then we've got meetups coming up too. I mean, take advantage of it, guys. Come in here and be a part of this. Real quick, I'm just going to share my screen for those of you who don't know about JJ's site. If you want to register for the networking group, you're going to want to come right here to jjazizian.com. Right here, you want to click on this register now button right here in the middle of the screen. And from right here, after you register, you can come right back to this page right here under events, YouTube. You can come check out all of the upcoming events. So if I click on events real quick, it'll take me into the events calendar. Here's our meeting today. And then right here under YouTube, flip side up with JJ. I mean, JJ's done, I mean, JJ's at like 300 YouTube videos now. And I mean, just look, if you look through this catalog, guys, I mean, it's just a wealth of information. And the other benefit to jumping into a networking group like this, at least for someone like myself and for most people, is that it's about the community. It's about meeting the people and the knowledge you're going to gain. But yeah, the friendships as well are just invaluable. And you can't do this business by yourself. I would argue there's few businesses that you can really do by yourself, and truly be successful. So take advantage of this. And Marco, I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everybody being here and answering, asking their questions, and so this was super helpful. But I'm going to sign off for Marco and myself. Thank you guys again, and we hope to see you on the next one.